Okay, urinary system anatomy. The gross anatomy is pretty easy, but before we get into the basic gross anatomy, let me just talk a little bit about what the urinary system does. It does more than you imagine. You have known for a while because you are a human that the urinary system produces, stores, and expels urine, which is one of the ways that you rid the body of waste products. But by doing that, the urinary system also rids the body of excess fluid. And all the fluid that you urinate out came from your blood plasma. So there's really an inverse relationship or an inverse correlation between the amount of urine you produce and the amount of blood plasma that you had. So the urinary system actually regulates your blood volume, the amount of blood that you have, and by doing that, it also regulates your blood pressure. And by choosing what to get rid of, the urinary system ends up regulating the water content, the ion content, and the pH of your bloodstream. And then the urinary system does a few more other things. It also regulates red blood cell production. There's a hormone called EPO or erythropoietin that is produced by the kidneys and targets the bone marrow and tells you when you need to make red blood cells. Okay, so we are going to get into the gross anatomy of the kidney. Start that. Okay, so with the gross anatomy of the urinary system, we'll start where the story starts, which is with the kidneys, and those are not hard to find, of course. So the location of the kidneys and then the external anatomy. So first they are in the superior lumbar region, right? So here's T12, right? And so this one right here is L1. So they're in the superior lumbar region. They are about the size of like a bar of soap. And they are what's called retroperitoneal. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember what retroperitoneal means, but basically, they are behind the parietal peritoneum. So let me show you this and then we'll draw it a couple times. Okay, so the parietal peritoneum is right here. Okay, this is the back, the peritoneum at the back. The parietal peritoneum, and they are behind the parietal peritoneum, and so they are what's considered retroperitoneal. The important thing about that is it means that they are not wrapped in their own layer of visceral peritoneum. They were in the metaphor that I used when I talked about this stuff way back at the beginning of the semester. They were really in the dish before you put the saran wrap in. So they are behind the peritoneum. And we'll do that in some more detail in just a second. So yeah, the parietal peritoneum. All right. And sitting on their superior surface are a couple of glands, and those are called the adrenal, or used to be called the suprarenal glands. They're on the superior surface. They're not usually that big. On the medial surface of the kidneys is what's called the hilum, or some textbooks call it the hilus, the renal hilum or hilus. A hilum in any organ is usually just this region where a bunch of tubes or projections or nerves come and go. And there are protective layers around the kidney. And so what we'll do is we'll start with the surface of the kidney and then we'll move out. And so that is really this figure. And this figure is really hard to grasp what you're seeing unless you look at it close. So it's figure 27-2. If I were you, I would pull it up so that you can sort of work through this stuff. Okay, so we're going to blow this up. Okay, and we're going to start from the surface of the kidney. Let me change the color of this. Okay, so if we start on the surface of the kidney, we are going to run into what's called the fibrous capsule. And the fibrous capsule is really just the connective tissue that surrounds it's like the outside boundary of the kidney. Hold on, let me make that a little a little smaller. No, that's as small as it can get. Okay, so that is the fibrous capsule, and the fibrous or renal capsule, it's on the surface of the kidney. It's made of dense irregular connective tissue, and if an infection made it all the way up the urinary tract into the kidney, this will generally be the place that it stops. And then superficial to the fibrous capsule is going to be another layer, and this next layer is going to be this layer of fat that's directly next to the kidney. That's called the perinephric fat. Perinephric fat, which is running all the way around here, and it's just superficial to the kidney. That's the perinephric fat. The perinephric fat, also sometimes called perirenal fat, is the fat that is closest to the kidney. And then what you're going to do is you're going to run into a layer of connective tissue called the renal fascia. And the renal fascia is right here. Okay. It's this layer of connective tissue that's between the two layers of fat. That's the renal fascia. It's also dense irregular connective tissue, and it's really kind of anchoring the kidney back to the body wall. And then on the surface of the renal fascia, as we're moving further out, we're going to run into a thicker layer of fat. And this thicker layer of fat is called the perinephric fat, and it's here, going all the way around here, this perinephric fat. Okay, so the perinephric fat is the layer of fat that's a little further away from the kidney. And then superficial to the perinephric fat is going to be the parietal peritoneum. So the parietal peritoneum we learned about way back at the beginning of the semester. That is the layer of peritoneum that actually forms the back of the cavity. All of the other organs are on the other side of that parietal peritoneum. So what is the function of all of this fat and all of this packing? So the kidneys are not suspended from the body wall by a layer of mesentery like a lot of the organs that are actually within the abdominopelvic cavity. So instead what they have is layers of packing material, fat, and then layers of packing tape, which is connective tissue. And all of this fat is important for not just cushioning the kidney, but also for holding the kidneys in place against the back body wall. And if the kidneys lose the fat really, really quickly, like with someone with a chronic illness that makes it really impossible for them to eat or maintain their body fat, then what can happen is the kidneys can actually fall between the back body wall and the connective tissue, and it can kink the ureter, and we talked about that at the beginning of the semester. Okay, so if you look at the internal gross anatomy of the kidney, let's stop and then we'll do that one in the next one.